Howdy ho, friends and neighbors. Welcome back to the Crossroad Cafe. Got another bass gear review. Um, today's specimen, today's victim of circumstance, another Squier bass. Squier P bass, precision bass, Olympic white. This is early 2000s, I think, early mid 2000s. Squier Affinity, I think. Um, 1 5/8 at the nut. It's got the really cheap, ugly tuners on it. I don't like those. I don't like the looks of them. They work fine, but I just don't like them. But anyway, Olympic white, my favorite color. Got some war paint on it. You can see it's been used. It's got some scratch and dent going on, which is often referred to as mojo. So, added the cover on the bridge, had it laying around, and back in the day, when they first started making electric basses, they would put foam under there to try to mute the strings, try to emulate the sound of upright basses. A lot of guys didn't like them. They flipped them over, used them for an ashtray. Back then, everybody smoked, and they're often referred to as ashtray covers. I changed the knobs. They're just plastic white. I had a couple chrome knobs sitting around the house, so I put them on, and I swapped the pickups out. Not sure that it was really worth it. I either put Made Mexico P-Bass pickups or PV Fury P-Bass pickups from the 80s. I got them mixed up, so I'm not sure which they were. I'm not sure they sound better than the stock that was in there, but it was an easy swap, and I like playing around, so I did it. Um, I think this is real rosewood on the neck. They've substituted that recently with other materials, which I don't like as well, but personal preference. This bass took a lot of setup. Took a long time for the truss rod to settle in, and finally did. And it works fine, the truss rod. And the nut, a couple strings were cut a little low, and I thought, just buzzing a little bit. And you know, I really could have lived with it, but couldn't let it go. So I said, I'm going to pop the nut off, put a little shim under there, and we'll be good to go. Came right out. 4 pieces. So I had to buy another one. I bought one at Sweetwater. They're only about $7. I bought 2 just in case. And so I put a new nut in it. Lo and behold, you know, I had 2 strings that I filed too low. So instead of using the new nut, which I may do, but I used the baking soda and super glue trick. Put a little baking soda in the nut slot. Some super glue. Make sure you tape off your fretboard and in front of the nut so you don't get glue on it, and it'll dry pretty quick, and then you just go back and file it. It's not a permanent fix, but it does work pretty good. It'll last for quite a while. Eventually you'll have to do it again from tuning the strings, but they'll actually act like a nut file over time, but it takes a good while. So anyway, like I said, this is my favorite color. With this video comes some free advice, which we'll get to later. Actually, a piece of free advice right now is if you come across a $50 P-Bass, you got to buy it. You can't pass that by. You just can't. I know I can't. I've had over 50 basses in my lifetime, believe it or not. And part of that's because I'm old, and the other part is because I get deals on them. I go to flea markets, garage sales. I peruse Craigslist. Many of my basses I didn't pay $100 for, or 200, and I've had a lot. I've had 50, over 50. I wish I had them. I'd hang them up in the Crossroad Cafe. It'd be like a little museum, you know, and I could play different bass for almost 2 months, every day. But my wife does not share my my affection or my addiction for bass guitars, so I don't think that would fly. And I don't even have 10 now, but there's been a few I wish I'd have kept, and 3 or 4 that really went up in value quite a bit right after I sold them, of of course. But anyway, no regrets. I just like playing around with basses, and this one's no exception. So we're going to do a little sound demo. Playing through a custom DE300 head, kind of meant to emulate an SVT. Honestly, it doesn't sound like an SVT, but you can dial in some grit if you like, and there is a little grit dialed in on that head, and you'll notice it most with the tone knob all the way up on this bass. But I'll just give you a short sample of the sound. This is with the tone knob all the way up. Hear any bad notes, I'm throwing them in for free. Let's cut the tone back a little bit. Starting to fatten it up like grandma's gravy, simmering on the stove. Cut that back about 50%, I would say. Educated guess. Well, I don't know about educated, but it's a guess. Hear a little bit of the distortion from the amp there. It will clean up, but no tone. Ooh, that's like grandma's biscuits and gravy. Big, thick, gooey goodness. If you eat too much, it's gonna sit heavy on your stomach though. Actually, most basses don't sound good with no tone on them. This one sounds better than most of them, actually. Might be good for reggae. Mon, you know, Mon? Dial some more tone back in. that's the bass line of that song. It's actually not. That guitar's doing that. The bass is not doing that. But a lot of guys playing on bass. Sounds cool. About 50%, I think. Bass actually plays nice for an inexpensive instrument. There were no sharp fret ends on it when I got it. The frets were pretty gnarly, just oxidized. So I cleaned them up, taped up the fretboard, polished them, and dropped the bridge saddles. What else? Tweaked the truss rod, which you know, a lot of people have guitars or basses, and they don't know how to set them up, and they're afraid to play with the truss rod, and they play so bad, the action's so high, they give up because it's just too hard to play. I think a lot of guitar players and bass players, when they start out, they just quit because it's just too hard to play. It's really easy to learn how to set a guitar or a bass up, especially a bass. You know, if it's a 4-string, there's only 4 strings. Saddles go up and down, and the truss rod just gives you a little relief in the neck, which you need a little bit for your strings so they don't buzz out. But it's not that hard, and you can watch some YouTube videos, and you can save yourself $75 or $100 from taking it to a luthier to set up. Maybe the guy at Guitar Center, and sometimes they don't know what they're doing either. But it's pretty easy to do. I set up all my own basses. I'm not good with the nut, but you know, if the nut doesn't need cut, I can set them up and get some nice low action on them. So I encourage you to do the same thing. Now, as far as a piece of advice, I had a couple of them, actually 3. One, you come across a P bass for 50 bucks, especially in Olympic white. Buy it. You got to buy it. You cannot pass it by. That's one piece of advice. Another one, a few weeks ago I did a gig with some of my friends. We used to have a gospel blues band called Route 66, named after the 66 books of the Bible, the original Route 66, and from Genesis to Revelation and all points in between. And we played gospel blues. We did it for years, and not so much anymore, but once in a while we get together. We did a gig a few weeks ago at a church, and it went fairly well, and it was going fairly well, and all of a sudden I had no bass. I had my 62 reissue P bass, which is my favorite, and it just cut out. I don't know if it was the jack or one of the tone knob, volume knob, but we had no bass. Fortunately, Mr. $50 flea market P bass was along for the ride, and he saved the day, and we finished the gig. So if you're a gigging musician, it's good to bring extra strings, but I highly recommend bringing an extra instrument too, just in case of mechanical failure. It's kind of like owning an old Honda Element. You never know what you're going to get. And or an old Jeep, as a matter of fact. My buddy's got a Jeep, and he's had just as many problems with that as I have with my Honda. So, go figure. But anyway, that's my advice. I have one more piece of advice, and this is about the great gig in the sky. Make sure you're ready. The Bible says it is appointed once to die, and then the judgment. And it's too late at that point. The Bible also says today is the day of salvation. And I think it says that because we are not guaranteed tomorrow. How many friends or family members have you lost? You wake up the next day, you take for granted they're going to be there, and you heard that they passed away. So don't take anything for granted. Um, have your affairs in order. Buy lots of inexpensive bases at flea markets, garage sales, on Craigslist. Take an extra instrument to your gig. And last piece of advice, keep tuning in to the Crossroad Cafe for more bass gear reviews. Thanks for stopping in. See you next time.